afternoon. And at Walpole, we're meeting with Chief Joe Gilbert, and it was Chief Peters we met with in Town. And Rex is going to be a guide for us, giving us a bit of tour there. So this chance was just what we said, meet and greet and have lunch with Carolyn. So don't stop eating, and don't stop reading and meeting with each other. There's no formal agenda. I want to tell you a little bit about Carolyn, though. I know some of you follow her on Power and Politics. See her, and I see some nods. Gert was watching her, I think, years ago, even at the beginning of the prior to the last campaign, and had told me about her. Carolyn was a family doctor in downtown Toronto before she became a member of Parliament, and has been holding that position now for 15 years in her riding in Toronto. She was in the Paul Martin government named Minister of Public Health, and I think it was the first Minister of Public Health. So and the last. And the last. Do we need a Minister of Public Health? I think so. And that's one that's very closely linked to Aboriginal issues either, also is the health issues. So Carolyn is very outspoken, she's dynamic, but candid and funny. So her speeches aren't coined or memorized speeches, she just talks the way you'd like to have someone talk to you. I became connected with Carolyn during the campaign, and she was really supportive. We heard one day with the Weather Day's notice that she would stop in the edge of our riding away from Windsor, and we had her for about an hour at Country View Golf Course, and a few of you met her there. After the election, when the results were disappointing for many, Carolyn and others, I'm sure you weren't the only one, said we want to pull together the candidates who were not elected and continue to use their expertise and use their ideas, and she formed what's called a shadow caucus, and that's the pin I probably wear today. And so I've met with Carolyn since then. So for me, she's certainly been an inspiration, and for men and women alike. She encourages people to be involved, she listens, she's been on tour across Canada, meeting particularly in Aboriginal communities, because right now her portfolio is the Liberal critic for Aboriginal and Northern Affairs and Development. Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. And said, well, let's just see what's happening locally, and has had her eyes open, I think, so far today. So that's our welcome and introduction to Carolyn. You might want to move your seats to be able to see her better.
Well, this is great, and thank you all for coming out. And it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be here in this really exciting role that some of you would be surprised that I asked for, which is as the critic for Aboriginal issues. When Barbara asked me what I wanted to do, I said I'd like to do Aboriginal affairs because I think it's an area where we need a lot of work done. And I had been the critic for lots of things, from social development, health, democratic renewal, and I think on most of those files I felt I kind of knew what we would need to do if we got to form a government again. On Aboriginal affairs, I felt that even though we worked very hard on the Kelowna Accord for 18 months, coming up with a reasonable plan that was developed bottom up, that still there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to be doing. And I think one of the reasons that this particular time is exciting is because I think there's finally acknowledgement that the whole issue of Aboriginal education to non-Aboriginal people has to be the way forward. And so that if we look to New Zealand and what happened there, where all of a sudden Maori studies was part of K-8 and then optional in high school, we watched the whole relationship turn around as almost like recycling and saving the planet, that once the kids get it, the parents get it, the grandparents get it, and that there's been this real turnaround in terms of the respectful relationship between the Maori people and the colonizers. And so it's been a very exciting from the time I was minister, and then time developing new friends, and that as a family doctor who was pretty interested, well, actually who had no clue that when I was fighting for Women's College Hospital in Toronto that I was actually doing politics, or had any idea that what we were fighting for in the women's health movement in terms of poverty, violence, the environment, shelter, equity, education was actually part of really keeping people well, and would be what I would be asked to do when I was Minister of Public Health, and then what I felt that I wanted to do in terms of taking what we know about social determinants of health and being able to move it into this next chapter around economic development, governance, and really renewing the relationship that I am pretty excited that we do have an opportunity, and particularly with Gail's expertise in what was tried in terms of curriculum here in Ontario, what the Human Rights Commissioner in Saskatchewan began, and now with Justice St. Clair coming to Toronto this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission having already put out that 3 of the recommendations is about changing the curricula in the provinces and territories across this country to actually have people understand about the effect of residential schools and what actually it's going to take for that promise and the apology that the Prime Minister made 4 years ago, I guess. Yeah, that means nothing if the people of Canada don't really understand what it's about. And so part of my job now is to not only the things I get to do in Parliament, which is pretty grumpifying, standing up and listening to non-answers and, if not whoppers, but definitely the sort of, we cannot believe that even Evan Solomon now is able to say, you just said that, that it's as opposed to believing the conservative talking points, that we are actually, I think, able to get out and about across this country. I am blessed that Cynthia Wesley-Eskimo, who was our candidate in York Simcoe, has been helping us get going around this country, and things like in Guelph, we had 250 people come out on a Saturday morning to learn about First Nations and Métis issues and about the work that we have to do. So this is work that I can do without Stephen Harper's permission. He can't vote it down. We just keep going. And so in trying to keep sane in this rather grumpifying time, there are serious things that we get to do, and this issue of really the biggest social injustice in our country that we, I believe as Liberals, know needs to be turned around, that we get to work hard on this, but also the civic literacy that it will take to have Canadians with us as we go in this journey. And some of the things that I'm excited to hear about this afternoon at Walpole Island is that this is one of the real lighthouse foci of a number of neat things, the Paul Martin Initiative, the ability of schools that can really make a difference in terms of what we know is I think the biggest challenge around just Canadians having to understand that if you're a child on reserve, you will have $7,000 per year invested in you. If you're a child in a school off reserve, depending on what province you're in, it'll be $10,000, $11,000, or $12,000. That can only mean that those kids are at a disadvantage. They're being discriminated against in the investment we're making, and therefore we can't be surprised when less of them finish school and end up in unemployed or with lesser jobs, but also that we know that if kids end up coming away from their culture, away from understanding their roots, that they also don't do as well, and that they get sort of orphaned in Thunder Bay, and it's, as so many of the chiefs have said to me, that they don't want to see their children in a river. That this from suicide rates to every single statistic that you want to name is unacceptable in this country. And so we have done a small primer on Aboriginal issues from the Library of Parliament. It's quite interesting, the number of people who are downloading it to have a look, a PowerPoint. But mainly what we're trying to do is get people involved in things like Shannon Stream, in terms of Cindy Blackstock's initiative at the federal court, that there are things that we can point people to actually, if they want to make a difference, to be able to show that we care. So in that caring, there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding out there as to what Cynthia Wesley-Eskimo calls benevolent violence. This kind of charity that actually was top-down, Father knows best, is actually hurtful to communities. And if you think that, as the National Chief said this week on the Royal Visit, that next year it'll be 250 years since the Royal Proclamation that was that agreement between the Crown and the people who were here first in a government-to-government relationship. That is where we have to get back to, is the government-to-government relationship that got completely undone by the paternalism of the Indian Act and then the later manifestations that were residential schools, and really trying to take the culture and move to this almost ongoing policy of assimilation. As a physician, I was saying this morning that I learn a lot in my time in public health, and I used to do things like when I first got to public health, I never knew that there were sort of two feuding factions in public health. There's if these people would just stop, eat nicely, exercise, stop smoking, everything would be fine. The sort of choose health people. And then there was it's poverty stupid, the social deterrence of health people. And I didn't really realize that those people didn't like one another very much, and that there was this public health nurse sort of approach that actually that they were blamed for, when most of the public health nurses I knew would much have preferred that people were dealing with poverty and housing, and the idea that 12 people living in one house with no running water is actually germ warfare, and that many of the communities that I've been on in the last little while, you go into the school and it's empty, and you say, well, where are all the kids? And they say, well, we had to close the school because everybody's sick. And so how can you actually be successful if everybody's sick all the time? But everybody's sick all the time is because there's 12 people living in one house with no running water. And so I think that was the Attawapiskat sort of teachable moment, where even though Attawapiskat has other problems, there are 100 other communities exactly like that. And that we need to be able to learn from places like Walpole Island and others where they've actually taken control of education and of what the vision and the aspirations for their people themselves. And so I am obsessed that in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, that we can begin to turn this around by the next election. I think that I am blessed that I have past candidates like Cynthia Wesley-Eskimo and Joe Hanley, former premiers like Joe Hanley and Paul Okalik from NWT and Nunavut, that I have a newly revived Aboriginal Peoples Commission with people like Chad Cowie and who tomorrow night will be on the monthly call, and that they are helping me, as well as the Indigenous senators. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that people, that in terms of what I learned the hard way, is that it's an opportunity, and the trouble we're in Canada, to once again let the people who were here first lead. It's wrong that this victim thing has got to stop. They were right about the medicine wheel instead of our medical model. They were right that we should be keeping people well, not waiting to patch them up when they get sick in some sort of repair shop in a sickness care model. They were right in the pedagogy that we saw today at, what's the wonderful place called? Namashina? The village that's by the Indigenous Education Coalition, where people can learn by doing, as opposed to putting people in tiny little rows and filling them full of like they're empty vessels to be poured in at the top. That you know, bless Queen Vicky's heart, was maybe not the way that people learn best. That if you think of the natural stewards of the land, that the First Peoples knew that you don't clear cut, you don't fish something out, you actually need the planet to be sustainable. They knew that good governance was asking, not telling. And they knew that the elders actually had a lot to give. And that somehow, I always ask when I'm in Nunavut, how come your elders are called elders, and in the South we call them elderly? And it's there's a reality to this respect for elders, that somehow again that we were raised in a place where children and seniors were seen and not heard, and so it's or put away somewhere else. So I guess I'm just thrilled that we will have this opportunity over this next little while. I was thrilled that the Rotary Club in Guelph partnered with us on this, and you know, taking a big risk that we wouldn't be bashing Stephen Harper every 2 minutes, and we behaved ourselves, and I think that we got away with it. I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I guess I think on the other piece of this, and I would love your observations and comments to what are we going to do about what we all lived last year, where we knew that they were relying on F-35s and wouldn't give us the right information. We knew everything that was about the contempt of Parliament, the contempt of this Father knows best kind of government that doesn't think they have to give Parliament the information they need with which to make decisions, even how much things cost. But then that they get to go and, as somebody said to me yesterday morning in Lindsay, get to kill anything they don't understand, right? Any organization they don't understand what they do, instead of finding out the good work that they're doing, including the National Aboriginal Health Organization that had the Journal of Aboriginal Health and all this ability to do knowledge translation for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. But it is shocking that the health dollars get taken from all kinds of things. But I think that on the money cut side, we can maybe figure out kind of what they're doing, although we still don't really know where it's going to come up. But on things like immigration and EI and all of these new powers taken to the government and to the cabinet in terms of trust us, you'll find out later in the regulations what we've decided to do without the scrutiny of Parliament is really tough, because even last year, most Canadians don't know the difference between Parliament and government. They think we're all, you know, within 100 miles of the American border, they all think that he's the president and he gets to do what he wants. But until we can actually explain a parliamentary system, until we can actually explain that the Commons was there to hold the king to account. And the king couldn't tax or couldn't spend without the permission of the Commons. And that we actually have lost that because we're not being given the information or the time to actually properly examine what's going on. This particular budget implementation bill will change 70 pieces of legislation, 70, without us having a chance to look at it properly. That means all the changes to the First Nations Land Management Act are just happening really by fiat. It's not coming to our committee. It's not even going to the Senate committee. That's going to 5 committees will examine some of the other aspects of this bill. It is from suicide prevention programs in the National Aboriginal organizations to so many aspects of even the lay people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder in our military and our veterans. How you can cut these programs when last year 20 people returning from Afghanistan took their own lives. We only lost 157 in 10 years. I mean, that's not only, but compared to the Great Wars, this is a significant loss. But if in 10 years we lost 157, and last year we lost 20 in 1 year, because these people are not being properly looked after. You can't just say you've raised the budget if you're not meeting the need. And on so many aspects of what is the role of government, this government just doesn't get it. So I am thrilled always to come into a room full of people who get it. As you know, less than 5% of Canadians belong to a political party. That's probably at the height of a leadership campaign. That we actually need to be deputized, all of us, to get out there and correct people who are being seduced by this absolute active campaign to raise the cynicism of Canadians and of voters. The cynicism is their best weapon. That when citizens are saying all government bad, all politicians bad, when they get caught doing anything, everybody did it, the Liberals did it too, that pox on all their houses, why does it even matter if you vote, and then compound that with negative advertising. We know what happens. The cynicism rises, voter turnout goes down. When the voter turnout goes down, the people who are the most turned off are women, Aboriginal people, tenants, youth, and some new Canadians who just go, I can't be bothered, this is just too ugly to do. And then you end up with the perma-mad people on the right, always vote, and that's how you end up with these complete distortions of what really are Canadian values, even in places like Alberta, where there are lots of Liberals. They just gave up and decided not to vote. And so that you end up with a voter turnout of around 40%. And people thinking that Liberals don't have a prayer and therefore they don't vote. So we, over this next 3 years, have a lot of work to do. And we want within the party to make people who ought to be Liberals to feel that they can at least come and support us. We know that lots of people who help on our campaigns aren't members. Lots of our donors aren't members. But maybe those people would be comfortable being supporters. But mainly whether people want to be a supporter or a member or anything, we hope that the people who support those values that are about a compassionate heart and social justice and fiscal responsibility, not wedded in either the ideology of the left or the right, but they are prepared to make decisions based on evidence and understand that each decision has to be made on evidence, that being a centrist party doesn't mean you're roadkill down the middle all the time. It means sometimes you have to be very left in looking after persons with disabilities that need our help. But sometimes you have to be very, very, what would be perceived as right, except this is the biggest spending government in the history of Canada in terms of what actually should be some real transparency and accountability, and again, fund the nerve to fund what works and stop funding what doesn't work. And so, as we go forward, we want people to feel that we will be reaching out to all of the ridings where their Conservative member is unable to speak on their behalf, because we now know that they have gaffer's tape across their mouths and are some key in the back that winds them up to vote. That there's not actually any role for even debate, let alone discussion, let alone dissent. And when we go around, it's fun being on panels with some of these people, because as a liberal backbencher in a liberal majority, we actually pushed hard to get our government to do better on lots of things. And I remember my fight for the disability tax credit to better apply to people with mental health issues. I remember the fight we had on tobacco, the fight we had on Hep C, the fight we had on pay equity, the fight we had on endangered species, where 40 of us said that we wouldn't be able to support a bill unless it protected habitat as well. And so the idea of the role of a parliamentarian is being seriously eroded. We celebrated on Thursday night my 15 years with John Turner, who in 1963 gave some speech about the role of the Member of Parliament was being eroded. And I think that he ain't seen nothing yet in terms of what these mannequins are now doing. And I think one of the things that it's exciting is that in order to get back, we need Parliament to be again the higher calling, where Ralph Ferguson decides to put aside his responsibilities and feels that he has to go there in order to take a voice from the trenches of people in rural Canada, of people involved in agriculture, of people concerned about health. And it is going to take some time for us to get that back, that we want good people to run for office. And why would good people run for office if, like on the other side, they are to just suit up in their team jersey and spew talking points from the PMO? That is not actually a higher calling. And so we want, I think, to think that the bench strength on the Liberal side is small but mighty, and that we just want to get better. And I think that our spread week this week is really about that. It is about a different way of doing business. It is asking, not telling. It is about what is it that we aren't doing right that we can improve. And that's why we're out and about trying to explain our challenges, but also hear back as to what kind of Canada and what kind of impact is this present government having on your communities, but actually what are the solutions. I think we have to do two things. We cannot only oppose. We have to be in the business of proposing real solutions coming forward, because we can't